Hey everyone, you know, as much as I and many others give those on the left of the political spectrum a hard time when it comes to those in the establishment media predominantly, the reason why I do so, I can't speak on behalf of anyone else, but the reason why I do so is because I hate to see liberals and that moniker and what liberalism used to entail and what it used to mean being dragged through the mud and soiled to the manner that it has in recent decades. And the consequence of that is the fact that the people on the left in these media outlets, their so-called benevolence or their yearning for social justice has allowed their vision to be obscured to the point where they'll allow ideologically driven leftists, collectivists, socialists, and communists, fascists even, be the dominant narrative and have so much say throughout their pages, in videos, in podcasts, and on the newspaper print that Canadians and Americans and the British people consume on a daily basis. When I do what I do, it's to raise and elevate them. It's not just to insult them for the sake of insulting someone. That gives me no benefit. There's no benefit to me just by insulting someone. I want to raise, just like with my kids. I wouldn't insult my kids or hold them to any particular standard just as a means to what? Be an authoritarian? I don't have that pretense in my mind. It's not part of my composition or my makeup at all. But what I will do is hold them to account and be personally responsible and elevate and educate and inform them to the point where I want them to strive for real success. Not just in moral and philosophical aspects, but in their personal, social, and economic lives. But like I say, there are those on the left side of the political spectrum in the establishment media that I still hold out some hope for. And maybe in this aspect, maybe in these couple articles that I'm going to be references, maybe we're starting to see that, their gut, their conscience, their morality is finally getting the best of them. Enough pressure has been put on them. Enough evidence has been put forth and presented before them where they're like, yeah, I was wrong before. I was cheerleading for these people that I thought were on my side, but now I'm willing to recognize that I got to remain objective and be a true journalist once again. This is out of the Washington Post. It's funny, actually. It's an opinion piece, the World Post opinion, but they do put a little thing that drops down in a caption that says, opinion, a column on article in the opinion section, and then it puts in bracket, in print. This is known as the editorial page. So this opinion piece isn't just someone that submitted an opinion piece, which I'm glad they clarified this. It's not just some moron that submitted an opinion piece. This is the editorial board given their collective opinion on the subject. Headline: History proves how dangerous it is to have the government regulate fake news. Oh, just that headline article alone, because there's so many people that will only read the headline and move on, right? But at least that the people that consume Washington Post material and articles on a daily basis, predominantly people on the left side of the political spectrum, at least they're seeing this presented, right? So at least even your so-called authorities in the established media, your opinion makers, at least even they are telling you that don't ever turn to government or central planners or these authoritarian sociopaths as a means to an end. Even if it's to counter those that you perceive as being fake news or opponents on the other side of the political aisle, beat them with good observations, proper rhetoric, right? Counter arguments, rebuttals, debates, discussion. That's how you counter your opponents, right? Using violence or force or preventing them from having the capacity to speak. That's not how you beat your opponents. And that's not how you educate, inform, or enlighten the people that you're trying to help educate and inform and enlighten, the general population at large. Let's read down into the article a little bit here. Fleming Rose is a World Post contributor and a senior fellow at the Cato Institute. Oh, well, this makes sense. He's from the Cato Institute, so it's a libertarian institution. So I guess I shouldn't be surprised after all Now, of course, it would be in direct contrast and opposition to Trump because they might think that Trump will try to suppress their freedom of speech. But this is the beautiful thing about having opposing ideologies, ideas, is you have the people that you may not politically align with actually on your side, because freedom of speech has to work for both sides of the political aisle, and even those that have nothing to do with politics, right? Freedom of speech is something that should be important to everybody, philosophers and politicians and average citizens alike. The other contributor is Jacob McJong. I'm going to have a hard time pronouncing this one. Jacob Mchangamba, I believe. Like I say, I could be messing this guy's name up pretty bad, but excuse me for that. Is director of the Copenhagen-based think tank Justitia, Copenhagen, Denmark. In the 4th century BC, Athenian orator Demosthenes remarked that the difference between Athenian democracy and Spartan oligarchy was that in Athens a person could praise the Spartan constitution and criticize the Athenian one, whereas in Sparta, praising any other constitution was forbidden. This litmus test is still relevant for democracies more than 2,000 years later, but is equally crucial for a genuine liberal democracy that no one, and particularly no official institution, gets to determine the truth in matters of politics and public debate. Excellent, excellent, excellent. Nevertheless, Italy's antitrust chief Giovanni Petruzella feels so overwhelmed by the amount of information on the internet that he has called for government regulation to fight fake news. Petruzella builds his case by contrasting the First Amendment with the European Convention on Human Rights, which he argues provides no constitutional protection of fake news. This is due to an interpretation of the limits of protected speech that says that the distribution of fake news, in Petruzella's words, violates Europeans' rights to be pluralistically informed. We agree with Petruzella that the deliberate dissemination of false information is a menace to any society. However, his strategy to fight false statements may be even worse than the lies themselves. He wants the government to get involved in the process of verifying information and removing what it defines as fake news. Media companies that do not comply should be fined, he argues. This is problematic for several reasons. First, there is a huge amount of empirical data from different countries throughout history that make it clear that even democratic governments tend to use this kind of power to silence opponents and shut down speech they don't like. No shit, Dick Tracy. During the French Revolution, for example, policing the truth resulted in the execution of those who were accused of disseminating false news, which included anyone critical of those behind the Reign of Terror. In 1798, the U.S. Congress passed the Sedition Act in order to punish false statements about the government made with malicious intent. It was used to suppress opinions with which the Federalist administration of President John Adams disagreed. This is one of the reasons why prosecution for lies about the government are outlawed in the U.S. and why this kind of speech is protected by the First Amendment. Anyways, it starts to go on to referencing Donald Trump. And like I say, I don't want to get into the politics of the day, right? Because that's really what we're talking about when you're talking about fake news. It's politics of the day, and it's all about who's perceived as being the oppressed and who's perceived as being the oppressors. Like I say, take politics out of the equation. Let the free market of ideas flourish. And let you as the consumer, let everyone accept and accept the fact that you're a responsible adult and you can decide for yourself what's true or false. In reality, that's all we're talking about here. All of us free speech advocates and purists in every sense of the term of what it means to have pure freedom of speech is, yeah, we'll take the bad with the good, because you can't have any pretense of being able to have some singular authority that could determine which is truth and which is false. Right? Not even an algorithm, not even a computer program, not even a supercomputer should have any pretense of that kind of authority. Right? Let's all treat each other as adults and respect each other for the fact that it's the varying ideas and opinions of multiples of people that helped bring people out of the dark ages in the past and will help propagate liberty and freedom going forward and way off into the future. Now, this is just one article. This is going to surprise you because, like I say, Washington Post, I mean, we're already like, this is a very left-leaning media outlet. But as if one's not enough, I got an extra surprise, an extra shock in store for you. Because the next one that's pertain to the exact same kind of scenario, the same kind of information about talking about, fighting fake news and the suppression of speech or regulating and such, is now we're talking about the New York Times, a very long established, nowadays in the modern era, very left-leaning media publication and outlet. But even they recognize, I suppose because of the historical precedent, right? New York Times been around, under Democratic and Republican administrations that have seen authoritarianism and the suppression of free speech enacted by both sides of the political aisle. I guess they're coming around, and this is being presented by Daisur Wegabaishu. Not even sure how to pronounce that name. Sorry, once again. Headline in this is, as Google fights fake news, voices on the margin raise alarm. Now, like I say, New York Times is very much a left-leaning outlet, so they wouldn't be putting forth this article and presenting this information, or this person in particular wouldn't be, if it wasn't for the fact that this fake news crackdown, right, is actually hurting some of these leftist types, right, some of these collectivists, some of these socialists, some of these communist types. So they're trying to stand up for the people on their side of the political aisle, but once again, when you're promoting free speech, even if you're doing it for your own particular tribe, it's a benefit to people that you even oppose. That's what freedom of speech does, right? Freedom expands out. If you use freedom as the pretense for everything you talk about, it's expandable and out to anybody, regardless of skin color, regardless of ideology, regardless of race, regardless of gender. Freedom means everybody has freedom in the pure sense of the word, in the pure sense of what freedom entails and what freedom means. San Francisco. When David North, the editorial chairman of the World Socialist website, right, noticed a drop in the site's traffic in April, he initially chalked it up to news fatigue over President Trump or a shift in political consciousness. But when he dug into the numbers, Mr. North said he found a clearer explanation. Google had stopped redirecting search queries to the site. He discovered that the top search terms that once brought people to the World Socialist website were now coming up empty. Right? And I'm totally against socialists, but even I don't want Google, I don't want government, I don't want anybody to suppress what these socialists have to say. Counter them with arguments, debates, or facts, right? Don't try to, to me, and I'm a competitive guy, and my history is all about racing. To me, that'd be like, jamming a fucking, a steel pipe in the wheel of my component as I'm getting ready to race him down the track. Yeah, I'll beat the guy if I fucking make sure that he has no ability to fucking challenge me. But would I ever feel like I've really beat the guy, right? Would I really feel that I've accomplished anything if I handicap them in any way? No. Freedom of speech or proper competition means, I want you to bring your A game. And you're going to raise and elevate myself, because the only way I'll be able to beat you if you bring your A game is I got to bring my A game plus, right? That raises and elevates us all. This is something that we all have to understand. People from the left side of the political spectrum, the right side of the political spectrum, those that consider themselves centrists, or those that are completely philosophical in nature and fuck the politics altogether, right? We all have to recognize that how you raise and elevate each other, whether it's in the family setting, the community setting, the social setting, in the grander sphere as far as your states or provinces or your country or the world, right? How you do that is you allow the free market of ideas to flourish and let the best ones win. Let the ones that people will accept and reject. You don't help anyone to suppress them or to silence them or to silence opposition, right? You don't help anyone, especially when you're talking about nonviolent behavior and acts, which is what speech represents, right? There's no such thing as violent speech. Now, there is that cause and effect correlation where people say, like if I said, I'm going to kill you and I have a gun in my hand, right? But was it the speech that was the criminal act? I'm actually warning you. In a way, it's kind of a benefit that I'm warning you, because at least it gives you the capacity to enact some kind of defense mechanism, or to run or retreat or defend yourselves against me. So even when you try to put forth, present that kind of bullshit, that speech can be translated to hate in certain very, very particular circumstances, I still don't believe that to be the case. But hey, there are some people that have put forth a pretty good narrative, a pretty good rebuttal to what I would have to say, and I guess the general population errs on the side of, okay, there are certain things If I'm saying I'm going to come to kill you, the knife is in my hand, okay, we might consider that a criminal offense. But like, it has to be so much, that cause and effect correlation has to be so present and so undeniable that that would be the only way where you can, like, imprison, lock up, or penalize or criminalize someone for doing such. But these people basically, now I'll post a link to this article. I'm not going to read any more into it. Like I say, it's just basically, to me, it's just all about freedom of speech. Freedom of speech and being free from central planning regulators, dictators, or disseminators of truth, right? The ministry of truth, right? George, how Orwellian does this sound, really? But I'm glad to see that people in the New York Times, even though they're doing it for their own political bias reason, but at least, like I say, hey, if you're being honest, even if you do it for a politically biased reason, I'll shake your hand and congratulate you for at least being honest, right? And that's what I'm doing here today, is saying, even the New York Times, even the Washington Post, well, even a broken clock can be right twice a day. But I'm not going to be that derogatory towards them, because I'm very appreciative of the fact they're at least telling the consumers of their products of this kind of information. They're at least telling them, hey, you got to allow freedom of expression, freedom of speech. This is the most important thing that we have as human beings, is our ability to be free from force, subjugation, coercion, suppression of speech. We have to be free to think, speak, and act, as long as it's not violently or coercive or used force against other people. That's what freedom entails. That's what individual liberty is all about. It's Canadian Libertarian, and I love liberty.